Okay, we are started. Our guests are filing into the virtual room. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us from all around the world. It's great to see such fantastic sign-up numbers for this event today, isn't it, Professor?
It's great, really. This is one of our larger events. So something about this event must be of tantalizing nature for all of our attendees today. Scott, how are you doing? Everything okay?
Doing fantastically well. It's a beautiful sunny day here, or it was a beautiful sunny day here in Tokyo. How are you doing, Gareth?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. Yes, also a beautiful day here in Budapest and looking forward to engaging with our audience and talking about publication planning in our event today. Should be fun. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Yes, thanks to everyone for taking time out of your busy day to come and join our events. As always, we really appreciate it. And on behalf of Benthamscience, we welcome you and feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. The chat is set up for you so you can share your thoughts, ideas with us. And yeah, feel free to share your welcome message, or excuse me, your greeting message. Tell us who you are, where you're joining us from. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. As Scott mentioned, he's in Tokyo, Japan, and I'm in Budapest in Hungary. So welcome everybody. Do let us know where you are today. That would be absolutely fantastic. And also at the end of our event, we'll be having a Q&A session. So don't be shy. Please feel free to put any questions or any comments into the chat box as we go through our event. And people get a number of special gifts at the end of the event, right, Scott? A few things to keep our attendees going at the end of the event today.
Absolutely. As always, we'll be sending out a certificate 24 hours after the event finishes. And we're also going to send out our pre-submission inquiry form, I believe, if that's right. And I believe we're also going to send the full video recording to everyone who joins us today. So have a look for your email inbox about 24 hours after the event ends. We'll be sending you those links tomorrow. So I'm also very
Absolutely.
happy to see so many people signing up to this event, Gareth, because planning is not always the sexiest topic in the research cycle, but it's incredibly important. And I think that idea is catching on. Why is planning so important in your publication cycle, Gareth?
Absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. If you don't have a plan, if you're not planning, then you're going to fail. As the old saying goes, as I'm paraphrasing from an old quote. Really important, especially if this is a paper early in your career, if you're just getting going with the article writing and publication process. What we'll do in our event today is we'll show you a number of key steps to go through before you really begin the actual article writing process. Many people, and I've done this, and I'm sure, Scott, you have as well, you just sit down and you start to write. And if you're not ready with a number of key elements before you do that, then the process will end up taking a lot longer. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Absolutely. And the focus really is on the publication process and planning all the stages of your publication so that you have a smooth publication path and that you can maximize the impact and get into your best optimal journal and reach as many people as you can with your research. So we've got three main topics today. I'll turn it over to my illustrious colleague. I just want to introduce our speaker today. This is Dr. Gareth Dyke. He's my friend and colleague, and he is a university professor. He is a voluminously published researcher with more than 300 papers authored or co-authored. He is also a beloved lecturer and public speaker. So I'll turn it over to our star for today. Gareth, over to you.
Wow, thank you so much. It's great to see everybody here. It's great to do another event with you, Scott. We do lots of these events together. So if you enjoy this, well, wait till the end, of course. But if you do enjoy this and you'd like to have us come and do an event for your university or your research group, then of course you can get in touch with us at the end. And as Scott mentioned, this is a presentation that we're doing on behalf of Benthamscience publishers. In this event, we'll talk about three key elements of the publication planning process, really elements that should be in mind, should be planned, should be thought about and developed before beginning to write the full article. And the first of those is journal selection. We'll talk about that in a moment, but really having a target journal in mind, having a journal ready to go helps with much of the planning, because you'll be able to answer yourself many of the key questions that researchers often have about the writing and publishing process. Secondly, we'll talk about maximizing impact, ideas, strategies, topics to think about so that you can be sure that when you write and publish your paper and it gets accepted in your target journal, hopefully, it will then go on to have as much impact in your field and beyond as possible. And then finally, today, we'll talk about titles and abstracts, really useful elements of the article writing publication planning process to have at least drafted in mind before you begin overall article writing, so that you can then use these elements of the article to build out other parts of the structure. And of course, with all of these events, with all of these training events that we do, the point of this is to help you be more effective as a writing and publishing researcher, as a writing and publishing academic. So those are our elements today. Don't be shy. Do get in touch with us. Do put your name and where you're from in the chat box. And of course, again, if there are any comments or questions, we'll be back at the end of the event in order to share a quick Q&A, talk about any of your feedback, talk about any questions or comments that you may have. Now, Scott and I are working with Benthamscience publishers, and if you've not heard about Benthamscience publishers before, it's worth having a look at benthamscience.com. Great publisher, leading scientific, technical, and medical research publisher with more than 160 online and print articles. 126 hybrid journals. Those are journals that publish in the traditional manner with content behind a subscription paywall, only available to those institutions, those individuals that have a subscription, and 40 open access journals, as well as more than 1,300 online and print books, and a variety of other information solutions for researchers. So if you'd like to learn more, perhaps you're a librarian or a research leader at your institution, thinking about learning more about Bentham, then do get in touch, do have a look at the Bentham website. Indeed, if you're a librarian listening to this and you'd like to get access to all of the Bentham content, all of those journals, all of those fantastic ebooks, and you'd like that content free, absolutely free for your institution for 3 months at no obligation, you can register for a trial by scanning the QR code here on the screen. Just give the QR code a scan and you'll be able to get all of that content, access for all of that content for your researchers immediately. So then you can decide, of course, is it any good? Is it something that you want to continue to subscribe to in the future? So do have a look, do scan that QR code. We will be showing you that again at the end of our event today. So in our training, in our webinar today, we're going to begin the publication planning process by talking a little bit about journal selection. Now, I always say that one of the 3 main elements to have in mind before you start writing your next paper is a journal. Have a journal in mind. You can then target a lot of the structure, a lot of the planning that you do around writing and structuring your eventual research article around the journal that you've chosen. Very, very important. And early journal selection, early journal targeting with your research is also critical in terms of impact, which of course we'll talk about in the second part of our event today. There's about 2 million research articles published every year, about 2 million. And in the health sciences alone, medical and health sciences, around 30,000 articles are published every month. So how are you going to stand out? How are you going to make sure that your research receives the attention that it deserves with so much other research being written up and published? Well, journal selection is one key element to that, making sure that you do publish your work in a journal that lots of other researchers in your field and beyond are going to read. But also, we'll talk about this in the second part of our presentation today, strategies and topics for attaining and achieving impact. Journal selection, it's really a marriage between your research and the publication of your research, lots and lots and lots of successful writing and publishing academics. This is something that I learned quite early in my writing and publishing career. They don't start to write until they've got a target journal in mind. And why is that? Well, every journal's different, of course. The kind of article that you might write for one journal would be quite different to the kind of article that you might write for another one. So think about what kind of article you wish to create with your research, and go and have a look at where other publishing, writing, successful academic colleagues in your field, you must know who those colleagues are, which journals are they using for their research, which journals are they targeting with their research articles. And you can go and you can match your article, the kind of research paper that you want to write, to a target journal. And the best way to do this, of course, is to communicate with other people as you start the publication planning process, talking to other researchers, talking to colleagues in your department, and making pre-submission inquiries, which is not something that many researchers do enough. Writing to journal editors. We'll give you a template at the end of this event today. Writing to journal editors and asking them, will this article, this piece of research that I plan to write up, will it be suitable for publication in your journal? Would you be interested in seeing a submission? And that's why, as we'll talk about in the third part of our event, having a title, having an abstract, having some information that you can share with a journal editor is also an important part of the planning process. Researchers look at journals, of course they do, of course we do, and they think, is this journal accessible? Is it open or not? Many researchers would like their work to be published in open access journals, but there's a cost often to them, which we'll come back to in a moment as well. And they think about the impact factor because of the way that research is assessed around the world. Research is assessed internationally. So an open access journal that's relatively low in cost, that has a decent impact factor, would be a very good choice for many researchers publishing their work. They want peer review, of course they do. You shouldn't be sending any of your research work to a journal that's not using full peer review. And you also want to see who's on the editorial board. Who's on the board? Do you recognize the names of those other academics that are involved with the journal? So we're looking at impact factor, reputation, reach within the field, and open access. Is the journal accessible? And is it going to be open? And can other researchers read and get access to my work? So people tend to aim high with their research submissions, but of course, you can't send everything that you write to Nature, Science, The Lancet, and so on. So do choose your journal targets appropriately. And that's done, of course, as we talked about before, by communicating with journal editors, by talking to colleagues, by talking to your other researchers in your network and seeing if they agree. Is this work going to be suitable for submission to a particular journal? It comes with practice. Of course, it comes with experience. And we do make a key recommendation at this stage in the presentation, and that's for the EDANCE Journal Selector tool. Go and have a look at this, because finding a journal is a key step for researchers around the world. And there are not that many, if any, researcher accessible journal selection tools out there that are independent of publishers. The EDANCE Journal Selector tool being one. So you can use this tool without worrying that it's going to point you to a particular publisher. So have a look at that. Have a look at the EDANCE Journal Selector tool when you have the opportunity, as you can put into it your keywords, you can put into it elements of your abstract, and it will help you to find a good journal for your next research paper. So what do researchers want? What are we looking for when we select a journal at this initial stage of the planning process? We want speed. We want our papers to be published as fast as possible. Of course we do. We want a decent impact factor, and we also want high reach and readership. Benthamscience, at this point I should mention, Benthamscience again, provide all of these elements. So do have a look at the journals that Bentham has available as a route, as a source, as an avenue to publication for the researchers in your department, for yourself. Speed, decent impact factors, and high reach and readership, the kind of balancing act that researchers go through when they look at and think about what kind of journal they will be using for their next research paper. And we'd also like to quickly just talk about open access for a moment, because there's a big and important difference between the main kinds of open access publishing that we see in journals around the world. A gold open access journal is a journal that's publishing all of its content free and open for anyone to access. Gold open access. Usually, not always, but usually there's a cost associated with that, the dreaded APC, the dreaded article processing charge, but this is gold open access. All of the content available to anybody, anytime. Green open access, on the other hand, this is where you publish a paper in a traditional paywalled subscription journal, but you are allowed to put a draft, often a late stage or final draft version, the submitted version that got accepted by the publisher, onto a site like PubMed Central, like Archive, like your own website, or a site like Academia or ResearchGate, for example, sharing a late final stage draft of your publication open, while the final published version, the PDF that the journal publishes, is not accessible in an open fashion. Check the embargo dates that publishers put onto this, because different publishers have different guidelines around this. But this is the key difference between gold and green open access in publishing. And as we mentioned before, talk to editors. Speed up your publication process by sending pre-submission inquiries. There's nothing stopping you from reaching out to editors, writing to as many as you like. You can write to 50, you can write to 100. Ask them, would you be interested in seeing this piece of research submitted to your journal? Of course, this can get you ahead of the game. It can get you into the mind of the editor. If they write back and say, great, we'd love to see that paper submitted to our journal, then you are already ahead of the curve. So we do recommend this. Speed up the process by sending pre-submission inquiries. Write to editors, write to as many as you like. This will also help you to select effectively a target journal, reaching out with your title and abstract if you have that ready to go. Journal selection then, and we hope that we've convinced you a little bit at this early stage of our presentation that this is an important first step in the planning process. Right, Scott? How are we doing? Everything good?
Everything looking good. We've got a few comments and questions coming in. And just before we move on to the next section, Professor, I wanted to ask you if we could address one question from our guests today. And it's about pre-submission inquiries. What information do you recommend that we include when sending a pre-submission inquiry to a journal? This is a great question. And in fact, we will send you our template after the event finishes. So check your inbox for that. And the template explains some of this, but Professor, you as a journal editor, what do you expect to see in a pre-submission inquiry? What will help you to view this person's work positively before they submit?
Well, we need to see, it's a great question. Thank you for the question. It's really, really important. So a short, succinct, information-loaded email is good to get as an editor that tells the editor why the work is important and why it would be suitable potentially for publication in this particular journal. So give the editor the title, or a tentative working title for the study, and give them the key result, give them the key takeaway. I've done X, Y, and Z, and I've shown A, B, and C, and I think this would be suitable for publication in your journal because maybe there's recent work that's similar to your work that's been published in the journal. Maybe it fits exactly with the aims and scope. I mean, these are all good things to put into a pre-submission inquiry to convince the editor this is an important piece of new research that they will be excited about showing to their readers in the journal. I think that would be pretty good. We'll give you a template, as Scott said, so you can easily do this in the future.
Great. Thanks for your answer, Gareth, and thanks for your question. And back to you, Gareth.
Brilliant. Brilliant stuff. And yeah, it's great to see so many people joining us today. Really fantastic. Let's move on. Having talked about journal selection, the first stage of your publication planning process, let's talk a little bit about how you can maximize impact with your writing and with your publication as you plan that article. And there are really three things to know about before you start to write. Your message. What's the key takeaway that you want people reading your next research paper to get out of that experience? And so who are your audience? Message. Audience, of course, is your target journal. We've talked about that already. And the structure of the writing, how the article gets put together, the structure of the writing, that comes from the audience, that comes from the target journal. And you're also, as you put your article into the journal submission process, going to be thinking about how you can suggest potential peer reviewers for that paper. We'll talk about cover letters in a moment, but you will need to make some suggestions for potential peer reviewers when you make your submission. And we would also recommend that it's a good idea to think about using preprint servers, because you can put, again, an early draft, a completed draft, the latest version of your research paper onto a preprint server. It then gets shared with lots of other researchers in your community, and comments will come back. This can help you to improve your work pre-peer review. So, in terms of effective writing and planning, putting an article together that's going to make maximum impact, let's have a think about not just the academic impact of your work, what kind of journal you're going to publish your work in, but also what the economic and societal benefits of your research study are. If you think about these elements before you begin writing, you can put information into your study that talks about the potential societal benefits of your work, and that will increase its impact. So what kinds of research impact are there? How can you maximize your impact, your research article's impact, as you write it up for publication? Because of course, publications remain at the heart of impact internationally, and in terms of how researchers get assessed. We count papers, we look at impact factors, we look at R and H indices. Your institution will be counting citations, circulation, and so on. But your research circulation, how many people read the paper, how many people download the paper, may not necessarily translate into its impact. Citations are important, of course, but let's also think about the wider context of the research that we do, easier in some fields than others, of course, but what will the bigger picture benefits of your research be? And this is very important for researchers in certain disciplines, because of course, coverage of impact factor journals is quite different depending upon which field you work in. Sciences and health sciences have very high percentage coverages of journals in Scopus, journals with impact factors, whereas other subject areas, social sciences, arts and humanities, business and law, down at the bottom of our little table here, have much less available journals, far fewer available journals in which impact factor publications can be attained. So it's important when you go and you talk about your research, when you talk to your university, when you talk to funding agencies, for example, that you do think about the wider impact of what you're doing and build your impact around that. Citation analysis, of course, is how we measure the impact of an author, an article, or a publication, simply by counting the number of times that that author, that article, or that publication has been cited by other works. So I can have an impact factor, my publications can have an impact factor, and the journal in which I'm publishing my work can also have an impact factor. So do be aware of the main tools that people use to assess citations: Web of Science, Scopus, Google Scholar, and ORCID, the last two being very important for researchers around the world. Do get yourself an ORCID ID if you haven't got one already, because this is a great way of identifying yourself. It's a great way to differentiate and quickly build a research CV without having to do much work. It's a great way to make sure that the results, the outputs, the publications that you create as a researcher get attributed to you. And many, if not most, international journals now are requiring an ORCID ID for article submission. You can see that academic impact is actually becoming more important over time. And this graph shows that impact assessments, academic article impact is increasing over time. So what we do is we give you a roadmap for impact. We do have a number of other presentations and webinars on this precise topic. So if you'd like us to come back and talk more about how you can specifically tailor and design your research for maximum impact, we'd love to do that. We'd love to hear from you. But design of the project, how your work is represented, how you engage your research with other readers, other researchers, and initially how you build early impact around the outcomes of your study, but then just as importantly, after publication, how you reflect upon what's happening with your article and how you sustain that impact going forward. And there are a number of ways in which you can think about doing this. Good example that we often use is around publications on the molecular genetics of tobacco. You could just talk about the molecular genetics of tobacco in your article, and that would be read by the smaller number of researchers around the world who do work on that particular topic, tobacco molecular genetics. But you could broaden your paper out, and you could talk much more about the health benefits, the economic benefits, the wider socioeconomic benefits, risks of your study, and what that means for people in general. There are always implications that you can talk about in planning and building and writing a research paper that go beyond the specific outcomes of the study itself. Ways to ensure that your work gets read, cited, and downloaded by as many people as possible. So in terms of an impact checklist, this is an important step to go through as you build your research publication. During the research itself, put as many outputs as possible online. Submit your work for posters and other speaking engagements online and in person. And of course, researchers are usually quite good at doing this, using sites like Facebook, LinkedIn, Researcher, ResearchGate, academia, to build a network of people interested in your research, and then sharing your outcomes and outputs with that network on publication, connecting the final publication to other related outputs in your group, in your research field, summarizing your work in plain language. This is something that we do a lot at Benthamscience, providing videos about research that have been published, providing plain language, easy to understand language, summaries of research that has been published. And don't forget to tell people about your publications. Don't do what I used to do when papers got published and just sit back and do nothing. It's important that you do share your publications with your research network. If you've got collaborators, more people sharing the research output within a network means more citations, more readership, more downloads, and so on. Keep your work alive by connecting it to new materials, and you can measure using a variety of tools which communication channels were most effective after publication. Reflect and sustain. Scott, how are we doing?
Yeah, we're doing great. We're getting some great questions from our guests and some great comments as well. And I just wanted to add something to what you were saying here. And I love this slide, Gareth. This is one of my favorites. But as we always tell our guests, we need to be ready to promote our research at all times, no matter what stage of writing or research that you're in. Be prepared to talk about and promote the exciting work that you're doing. And we'll talk about this a little bit later today in terms of forming a working title and an abstract that you can use to promote your paper, pre-publication. But think about how you can communicate your research to others at any stage, whatever stage you're in. If you're not published yet, if you are published, either way, be ready to talk about your research in terms that a non-expert in your field can understand. Be ready to promote this to whomever you talk to. Have an elevator pitch at the ready. Even if your research is ongoing and your results are still coming in, be ready to talk about your research to anyone who will listen to you.
Yeah, really, really important, because the more people that know about your research, the more people that understand its implications, the wider the reach of that research will be, and the more you can tell like your institution or that next funding application or that next job application about the impact that your work has had. Very, very important.
Absolutely.
I mean, you should know like where to promote your research, like depending upon what part of the world you're in, different channels are more or less important, but you'll find researchers within your network on certain platforms. We've talked already about ResearchGate, academia, LinkedIn, very important platforms and channels for researchers to network these days. But, different subject areas, different areas of the world, different groups of researchers will be networking on different platforms. So it's important to be aware of these. Conferences are often a great place to start with networking. As a young researcher, get involved in the variety of different conference activities, online and offline, so that you can build that network of like-minded colleagues who, by the way, will promote your research and potentially act as peer reviewers. And we took this great graphic from a company called Fast Track Impact. If you haven't heard about them, then do check them out. Fast Track Impact, in which we think about research impact and building and developing the impact of our research projects as an ongoing process, as a journey. So you're building inputs all the time into your research projects. You're carrying out activities all the time related to your research group and your research work. And there are outputs, of course, publications, prototypes, patents, methods, even new companies or exhibitions, performances. These are easy to track, whereas the other kinds of entities, the kinds of inputs that go into this impact tracking process might not be so obvious. But nevertheless, it's a great idea to have a look at this graphic and think, what am I doing as a researcher overall in terms of measuring and tracking my research impact? Because some of the outcomes listed here might not be outcomes that you had thought of before. Some of the impacts might not be impacts that you had thought of before. And a graphic like this, Fast Track Impact is the name of the company from which this comes, is a fantastic tool for a grant application or a job talk or a time when you have to discuss and talk about your research in a wider context. And it's also very valuable for planning your research publications because you will be able to put many of these elements into your article. Strategies for engagement, very important. As a researcher, you need to be able to explain the value of your work. You may need to justify your funding, show the impact of what you're doing. You can get better at this. You can learn to be better at public engagement. You will be able easily to learn to communicate about your research more easily. And we do have some training on that as well. So if you're thinking, I'd like some presentations at my university about research communication skills, public speaking, creating posters and infographics, then do get in touch with us. We'd be delighted to provide you with more information. Assessing your impact. This slide comes from Kudos. What do we do with our articles? We can measure many things, and most researchers don't bother. Most researchers don't collect these kinds of data. We are here to tell you that it is a good idea to at least have some idea about how many times your paper's been shared. Altmetrics can tell you that. How many mentions have you got? That's your citations, clicks, views, downloads, any press coverage, and any citations. Very important to track your impact. And we, as I mentioned, can help you to develop your presentation skills. And storytelling, remember in the example of the tobacco molecular genetics that I talked about before, if you have a story, a context, something that people reading, listening to your study, to the outcomes of your study can relate to, then you will get your message across much more effectively, for example, at conferences when writing up your study for publication. Don't forget, as the late, great Terry Pratchett used to say, research is incremental because people like to be told what they already know. They want to read research papers and they want to think, I agree. I expected that. I think that that result is correct. They want to agree with you. People like to be told what they think they already know. What they want is news, what they think they want, but what they really crave is existing information that fits with their view, with their mindset, with their ideas about how things work in your research field. So research builds on things that people already know. Large steps forward are often much, much harder to get published in the literature. Just ask anybody who's tried to publish a large step forward that ended up being really significant. That is often more difficult to get published in the literature. So far in our planning research papers presentation, we've talked about journal selection. And we've talked about how you can develop some strategies for maximizing impact. Let's now talk about writing effective titles and abstracts, ways to put these together and ways to build an impactful title and abstract for your next article. You're probably familiar with this kind of diagram, the general structure of a full article, the IMRAD, main body text of a paper, the introduction, methods, results and discussion, acknowledgements, references, and so on. These have distinct functions. If you'd like more information about how to write these sections effectively, we do have lots of other presentations. Again, we'd be delighted to point you in the direction of these, or come back, appear online at your university and give a presentation on article structure, writing a research paper. But your title and your abstract, very important to spend time on these, because these have to be easy, effective for indexing and searching. And you can use them or elements of them in your pre-submission inquiries and in your publication planning process. So what makes a good title? A good title should contain the fewest possible words to adequately describe the contents of your paper. Keep it short. By the way, research has shown that in the medical sciences, papers with titles less than 7 words in length actually get more citations. So if you want to be more highly cited, keep your title short. The main issue of the paper, the subject, accurate, unambiguous, specific and complete, no infrequently used abbreviations, and above all, you want to attract readers. You want to get people interested in reading more. You want people to think, that's a fantastic paper. I really want to learn more. Your title should be concise and informative. The most important words related to the topic, enticing your readers. Don't give away the punchline though. That is a declarative title, when the title says drug A is the cure for cancer. And often journals don't want you to use declarative titles. They want you to write what we call non-declarative titles. New information on drugs having a significant effect on cancer would be an example of a non-declarative title. And of course, not overly sensationalized. Keep your title compelling. Make sure that people do want to read your article. And we put a few examples of some papers recently published by Benthamscience in some of their leading journals: Current Neuropharmacology, which has an impact of almost 6, and Medicinal Chemistry. So if these are your subject areas and you are looking for a great publishing opportunity for your next paper, do have a look at Benthamscience publishers. Current Neuropharmacology, Medicinal Chemistry are some examples of the fantastic journals Bentham has available for you and for your research. So that's titles. Keep them short, keep them informative, entice, allure, and attract people to read your paper with an effective, non-declarative title. What about your abstract? Well, a good quality abstract also has to stand alone in search engines. Often the title and the abstract are all people read of studies. So your abstract must be honest and precise. Stand alone, no technical jargon, short and specific, and of course the quality of it often informs the editor's decision. Very, very important. So many journals base their decisions on what to do with papers on the abstract alone. And sadly, many authors write their abstracts in a rush, almost as an afterthought. This should be a concise, standalone piece of writing with a very clear message that accurately reflects the full text of the paper. And if you struggle if you find it difficult to write an effective abstract for an article or for a conference paper, have a go at these 4 questions. Answer these 4 questions with information from your study and then delete the questions. You will have the basis for an effective article abstract. Why did you do the study? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? Why did you do it? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? These 4 questions answered in sequence. And by the way, these 4 questions are also critical for the other sections of your academic article. Answer them before you start writing. Answer them in the publication planning process. Why? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? Because in any article, in any piece of writing, in any film, in any book, in any story, readers need to know where they've come from, where they are now, where they're going, and what the plot is of your research paper. A paper is a story. Readers need to be taken through the story, and your article needs structure, of course. And we will be very happy to provide you with links, follow-up presentations. Do tune in to other Bentham presentations on the website. You can find a whole list of webinars that we're doing. Once a month, we do these events. So do have a look at the Bentham webinar schedule to learn more about article writing and publishing. It's all about preparation. It's all about getting into the right mindset to write an effective academic article. As you choose your topic, identify your audience, identify the purpose of your research paper, and then, of course, gather any supporting information before you begin the writing process. Journal selection, how your work makes an impact, and having a title and abstract, at least in draft, at the beginning of the process helps with the publication planning as you begin that journey towards successful publication. And we've got lots of roadmaps, we've got lots of other content that we love to share with you as you prepare to write. Think carefully before you even put pen to paper. Selling yourself to a journal editor with pre-submission inquiries, with cover letters. Having a clear structure so that your readers don't get lost, and following simple rules of effective writing that make a huge difference. All of this content, all of these ideas, we have lots of presentations and content that we can share with you to expand on in more detail. And with that, I think it's time to hand back to Scott and have a look and see if we have any questions from our wonderful audience. Scott, how are we doing? Good?
Great, thanks, Gareth. We're getting some great questions tonight, and we'll try to get to all the questions that we can. And if for some reason we don't have time to address everyone's questions, we'll reach out to you personally. And I just wanted to make a comment that, first of all, I always learn so much from your talks, Professor. And one thing that I think is important to keep in mind is that a part of this presentation is outlining all the parts that you need to plan for before you write your manuscript. So, for example, if we're talking about abstracts and titles, we realize you may not be at the point where you're ready to write an abstract or a title. And if you joined our previous event on manuscript writing with Benthamscience here, you remember that we talked about the right order, the best sequence to approach writing the parts of your paper, starting with your methods and your results, and then discussion, introduction, and then finally drafting the title and abstract. So you might be wondering, why are we talking about title and abstract today? Well, we just want you to be prepared for all the parts and the key parts of your publication cycle that you'll need to prepare for and write for, because all of these will play a role when it comes time to publish and promote your research. So keep in mind that even though you may be at an early stage, you may not even have started your research yet, just keep in mind that all of the parts and components that Dr. Dyke went through today will play a key role in your publication. So make sure that you plan to maximize all of them and then maximize your impact. I just wanted to mention that to our guests today. And we have some great questions coming in. Shall we jump in? Gareth, are you ready?
Absolutely. Let's have a look. And thank you again, everybody, for attending. We've got great attendance for this event, which is always fantastic.
Always great to see. Now, this first question is for you, Professor. This is about preprint servers. And actually, we had 2 questions from 2 different guests related to preprints. The first question is, what are preprint servers? Will it impact the journal's decision to accept our article to publish? So that's one question. And then a related question from another guest is, are there any downsides to preprint servers? Okay, so what are
Wow.
preprint servers? What are the positives and negatives of preprints?
All right, these are great questions. Preprint servers are simply online platforms where you can share versions of your research work at earlier stages before the paper gets fully peer reviewed by a journal and hopefully eventually published. So they're great. Lots of researchers use them. You put your work onto a preprint platform, Archive, BioArchive, MedArchive, Research Square, PeerJ. I mean, there are many, and you should have a look at which preprint platform or platforms are most popular in your subject area. Put your work on there. Your work gets protected immediately by what we call a Creative Commons license and a document object identifier number, a CC license and a DOI. So your research can't be copied. It can't be taken by somebody else and published elsewhere. So in that way, preprint platforms are fantastic because you can get comments back from your community. Journal editors watch these platforms. They may write to you and say, we'd like to see this paper submitted to our journal. And so it's a great way to get work out there quickly, share research with the world, and also get comments and feedback from the community. So those are the advantages. I can't really personally think of many downsides apart from you need to be aware that work that is appearing on preprint platforms is very often not yet fully peer reviewed by journals. So be careful citing it in your own work. Just be aware of the difference between pre-printed research and fully peer reviewed and published research. So great questions. Thank you so much. Wonderful questions. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Okay, the next question here, one of our guests asks, how are citations tracked? Well, this is interesting. We talked at some of the citation analysis tools today, but any insight on how this process actually works or how we can make it work in our favor ethically?
Oh, well, I mean, citations are tracked by publishers. Citations are tracked by a number of analytics companies around the world. I mean, and they're basically just keeping track of articles that get published and the citations of other articles in the reference lists of those papers. So yeah, I mean, keeping track of it yourself is a little bit difficult, but you can follow on Google Scholar, for example, is one great way to keep track of your own citations. Just make sure you have a profile there. Make sure all of your outputs have been uploaded there. I mean, sometimes these search engines miss papers, especially if you've published them in obscure places or journals that aren't being picked up because they don't have listings, for example. But then you can go and you can look how many times other people have used your work, cited your work. Outmetrics is another great one. Those little colored wheels that we see on the tops of publications all of the time. Those also track blog articles and social media mentions of pieces of work. But yeah, like how can we build our citations is a topic for a whole another presentation, I think. But yeah, great question. Fantastic. Thank you.
Great, thanks for your question, and thank you, Gareth, for your answer. Here's another good question from our guest who asks, I have not obtained my full results. Can I start writing my paper already? Well, the short answer is yes, you can. You can, of course, start writing your methods and your results as they come in. In fact, that's one of the ways we recommend that you draft your paper is in those kinds of stages. You can start writing your methods and results, hand it over to a colleague while results are still coming in, and you can sort of hand things over that way. And we talk through the right order for writing your manuscript in our other presentations. So basically methods, results, discussion, introduction, then title and abstract finalized. Professor, any thoughts on this process for starting your manuscript writing early while results are still coming in?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Scott, like there are lots of elements of the structure that you can put together initially and your method section, for example. You can certainly also work on figure captions, creating figures as your results come in. Those are a really important basis for your results. I mean, we do recommend that you create your results section around your figures. And whenever I find myself lacking in motivation and I want to still be productive, formatting, working on references, checking all of those other parts and sections of academic papers. So absolutely, like if you've got a target journal in mind, you know what the final article that you're aiming for is eventually going to look like, then you certainly can start putting the paper together before you've finished collecting and analyzing all of the data and results. Fantastic question. Thank you so much.
Great question. Another guest asks, another guest comments, great presentation. Thank you very much. And thank you, Gareth, for your great presentation. And our guest asks, when writing in English, should we use American or British English, especially since some scientific nomenclature, for example, sulfur, is spelled differently depending on the variant of English? Well, this comes down to journal selection, doesn't it, Gareth?
100%. So check your journal guidelines for authors. Of course, once you've got a journal in mind, they may very well say that they want, to receive submissions in American English or British English, or that they don't mind. Like many journals say, we don't mind, but it's got to be consistent. And that really is one of the main ways that you can flag your work up to an editor and a language editor by mixing your spelling conventions up throughout your paper. So do check that, especially if several authors are contributing different sections. Let's say someone's written the results, somebody else is writing a section of the discussion. Let's just proofread carefully, make sure that all of the spelling conventions are consistent. But yeah, usually journals don't mind most often, so long as it's consistent. Great question though. Thank you.
Great question. And you can set your writing tool, whether you're using Microsoft Word or Google Docs, you can set it to either UK or US English, and just, it'll spell check for you, and it will consistently check for that convention. So as Gareth said, choose one and just stick with that. Great question. Okay, some more questions for our guests. We've still got a bit of time, don't we, Gareth? I think we're still okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We have time for questions. Fantastic.
Here's a great question. Our guest asks, hello, Professor, how to determine the articles that we search are suitable for our topic paper? This means the inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria, because sometimes I feel a bit lost during writing. Well, don't we all? This is a great question. Any tips, Gareth, for planning our inclusion exclusion criteria for articles to include in our paper?
Yeah, this is a great question, especially for like writing systematic reviews, those kinds of articles where you're going to have exclusion criteria, inclusion criteria. I mean, one tip is to look at other studies that are similar to the kind of study that you wish to write and see what criteria those studies have used. And there are some great AI tools out there now that you can have a look at to help you with this kind of issue. I mean, there really is no need for you to spend lots of time scouring the literature anymore. Like, we'll give you a list of AI tools at the end of this event as well. We'll follow up with some information on that. But yeah, like generally, I mean, yeah, we would need to know more information about your topic in order to provide you with specific advice on this particular question. But do feel free to get in touch with us at the end. It's normal, and yeah, everybody feels lost during writing, of course, but let's take advantage of the tools and techniques and opportunities that are available at the moment to speed up these kinds of processes. But thanks, that's a great question. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Great question. And if we are using AI tools, make sure we use them ethically, disclose their use to the journal, and also check whether the journal policy on the use of such tools, and make sure that we're always open and transparent with tools that we're using. Thank you, Gareth, and thanks to our guest for the great question. Let's see. Some more great questions here. We'll try to get to all of these. If we can't, we'll reach out to you personally. Here's a great question from our guest who asks, how do you stay motivated and persistent in the face of potential rejection or setbacks during the publication process? This is such a great question. We need to prepare ourselves for possible rejection. That is part of the planning process, isn't it, Gareth?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, academic researchers get rejected almost more often than any other job or line of work that you could have. I mean, we talk a lot with salespeople all the time in the work that we do, and maybe that's an example of a job where you get rejected all the time as well. But yeah, I mean, of course, like the answer is mindset, right? I mean, if you are getting rejected, there could be a number of reasons for that. Like the submission that you've made is out of journal scope. The journal editor just doesn't feel that the paper is significant enough, whatever that means for the journal. You've got to keep your readers in mind, make a clear argument to the journal editor why the work should be published, but rejection happens. So take on board the comments that you do get. If you get comments back that are positive, do take those on board and use them to improve your work. I would always say if you get rejected, take what you can from that experience that's positive, move on to the next journal. Don't go too low too fast. Don't get downhearted and just suddenly send your just rejected Nature paper to a journal that's got a way, way lower impact factor, do keep your eyes on the quality of your research, and that even if you haven't got it published in one of the leading journals in your field, you may be able to get it published in one of the not quite so leading journals in your field. Yeah, so that's a really great question. Thank you so much for it. Yeah, we love that question. Thank you very much. It's great. Really. How to stay motivated and persistent.
And this is a transferable skill that transfers to all other fields as well. If you happen to branch out from your research into other areas as well, sales and so on. I mean, it really is a key transferable skill to be resilient in the face of rejection. It's something that you'll build up over time. It's a fantastic question. Question from a guest about, for example, video and animated abstracts. I'm going to ask our guests to reach out to me or reach out to us personally. We can point you towards some resources to help you with those. So I've put my email address in the chat window. So if you are the guest, the anonymous guest who asked the question about video abstracts, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to reach out to you and give you some resources to help you with that. Here is another question. This is another great one. How do you, oh, that's a peer review question. So maybe we'll take another planning question here. Professor, what is your opinion on the use of AI tools for proofreading an article? So another AI related question. AI tools for proofreading. So I assume we're talking about proofreading your own article. Gareth, any thoughts on these? There's many tools now. Any thoughts?
Yeah, no problem at all. Like you should be using, or you must be using AI tools ethically, as Scott mentioned already, so disclosing their use to the journal. But there isn't any problem with using these tools to proofread, to check your article, to run it through a check to make sure that there's no spelling mistakes, even helping you to write, structure, build the different sections, so long as you tell the journal that you've done this. And once you've got a target journal in mind, do have a read of their guidelines for the use of AI tools before you start writing, before you start using the tools, before you start building the paper, because different publishers, different journals have different guidelines on this. But by and large, they're saying, if you tell us, no problem. So that's what you should do in order to keep the process ethical. Peer reviewers need to know if certain parts of the paper have been built with the help of AI tools. But that's a really great question. Thank you so much for asking it. But the short answer is no. Just report them and be ethical about their use.
That's a fantastic question. Well, I think we're nearly out of time. I think we've gone through most of the questions today. If we did not answer your question, we do have a record of all your questions. We'll reach out to you personally with an answer as best that we can. One of our guests asked, what is the best way to promote your published research to increase its visibility and impact? I'm going to send a link to a video that will help you with some of Dr. Dyke's tips and tricks on post-publication promotion. So thank you for your question, and we'll send you a link to a video that'll help you with that. And with that, I think we'll wrap up our event today. And I wanted to thank everyone for joining us from all around the world and taking time out of your busy day. And especially, as always, thanks to my friend and colleague, Dr. Gareth Dyke, for sharing your insights with us. I always learn so much from joining these events with you. Gareth, any final words of inspiration for our guests today?
I think we'll just say thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Don't forget to follow Bentham. We have a range of social media channels here for you to get in touch and follow Benthamscience. Have a great evening, Scott, and have a great day, everybody. And thank you again.
Thank you, Gareth, and thanks, everyone. We'll send out your certificate and links to the full video in an email tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.